Hello, and welcome to our joint webinar with the Friends of Birzeit University entitled The War on Palestinian Education. This is our first joint webinar, and I want to take a moment to introduce myself for those who don't know me or the Galilee Foundation. My name is Maha Al-Farra. I'm the Managing Director of the Galilee Foundation. We were founded in 2007, about 16 years ago now, and we're a British registered charity. We started off supporting disadvantaged Palestinian students in Israel. And since then, we've expanded to support students in the occupied West Bank also. There are about 1.8 million Palestinians living in Israel, and over half of them live below the poverty line. So we started a scholarship program where disadvantaged Palestinian students are given the opportunity to go to university in Israel because they're most of the time not eligible for most scholarships. And with our scholarship, they're required to participate in our educational program, which strengthens their Palestinian identity and heritage. We do workshops like learning about Palestinian literature, having the opportunity to speak in their Arabic mother tongue, going on field trips to villages which were once Palestinian, learning about the Nakba, because none of these things are taught in the Israeli curriculum. We also do vocational training like career development and public skills workshops. And we've also partnered with other Palestinian organizations in Israel doing amazing work like Mada Al-Karmal, Baladna, Yafa Youth Movement, and Adala, who you will meet later. And in the occupied West Bank, we've partnered with Al-Quds University. So that's us in a nutshell. For more information on our work, check out our website, and we're all over social media. And also just a note to say thank you to everyone who has donated today. You can still donate, and the funds will go to FOBZU and Galilee Foundation. So over to you, Omar.
Thanks very much, Maha. It's an honor to join Maha and the Galilee Foundation in welcoming you this evening to this webinar on behalf of FOBZU, Friends of Birzeit University. My name is Omar Shweki. I'm the director of FOBZU, a UK charity that has been working to support higher education in Palestine since it was founded in 1978. Today, we do this through our scholarship program, supporting students in financial need at Birzeit University. And since the war on Gaza in 2014, we've also provided scholarships to students in Gaza too. We also work to raise awareness in the UK about the barriers to education for Palestinians and advocate for the fulfillment of the rights of Palestinian students and academics in Palestine. Finally, we work to overcome the international isolation of Palestinian universities by building links between UK and Palestinian higher education. With that in mind, it's a special honor for me to introduce this evening one of FOBZU's inaugural UK Palestine Academic Links Fellows, Professor Arathi Shriprakash, who joined 10 other UK academics earlier this year for a week-long study tour in Palestine, participating in workshops and briefings from Palestinian students and academics, as well as civil society organizations. And since returning, I'm delighted to say, has contributed heavily in very important ways, to fostering academic relations between scholars here in the UK and in Palestine. We are very grateful to have Professor Shriprakash chair this evening's event, a leading scholar of education, race, and racism. She recently joined Oxford University, taking up the position as Professor of Sociology and Education. Her research explores reparations and reparative justice in education, and she is the author of Learning Whiteness, Education, and the Settler Colonial State. Pleased to hand over to you, Arathi.
Thanks so much, Omar, and thank you, Maha. And thanks everyone for coming to this webinar. We actually have over 100 people here, so that's really fantastic to see. So we're here to learn about the war on Palestinian education. That the war has had a devastating impact on Palestinian higher education, students and academics, but we're also here to learn more about how there has been an undermining of the Palestinian right to education, academic freedom by Israelis' policies long before this present conflict. Indeed, early this year, as Omar mentioned, I had the opportunity to learn more about the experiences of Palestinian students and academics and the histories of the barriers to education imposed by Israel during a visit to Birzeit University as part of the visiting fellowship organized by FOBZU. And I'm honored to have been able to be invited to chair this panel today, which brings together some colleagues who I had the pleasure of meeting at Birzeit, Samia and Sundas. It's lovely to see you, as well as meeting new friends, Adi and Salim. So let me introduce you to the panel today and we can get started. Our first panelist is Salim Lubad. Salim is a physicist and doctoral candidate at the University of Oxford, working on the development of nuclear fusion energy. He's worked on several academic initiatives with Palestinian universities, such as the OxPal Medical Link and the Oxford Jesus College Gaza Scholarship. Salim is an Arabic language poet, writer, voice-over artist, and TV presenter whose work is showcased widely. Our second panelist is Samia Al-Botmeh. Samia is assistant professor in economics at Birzeit University. She was a former director for the Center for Development at the university, and her research has explored alternatives to neoliberal development in the West Bank and Gaza Strip and gender differentials in labor market outcomes. Our third panelist today is Adi Mansour. Adi works at Adala, the Center for Arab Minority Rights, as staff attorney in the Civil and Political Rights Unit. He's also a founding member and activist of the Haifa Youth Movement and served as the head of the Arab Law Students Forum at Tel Aviv University, where he completed his LLB in law and BA in political science. And Sundas Hamad. Sundas is the coordinator of the Right to Education campaign at Birzeit University, a campaign that I found absolutely fascinating and important to learn about during my visit there. She's a human rights activist and holds a master's degree in international studies and is interested in social justice and academic freedom. So a big welcome from all of us to our panelists today. As I mentioned, we're over 120 people now gathered in this webinar, which is fantastic to see. For participants here, we will have time at the end for some questions and answers. So please type your questions into the space provided at the bottom of your screen. And I'll be trying to collect a few of those questions at the end to pose to our panelists. So without further ado, I will hand over to Salim.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. First, I would like to offer a quick disclaimer. Although I am from Gaza, I'm not currently based there, and my work with Palestinian academia has been limited to collaboration projects between UK institutions and universities in Gaza. Sadly, the more qualified academics in Gaza who can speak better on the subject are currently running for their lives, and their voices are notably absent. So I will endeavor to fill their shoes as best as I can, hoping that we will hear from them, well, soon. It's essential first to emphasize that the attack on Palestinian academia is part and parcel of the Israeli occupation. This, of course, extends beyond the immediate destruction that we see today and we've witnessed over the past assaults. My colleagues from the West Bank will be able to elaborate further on the education under direct Israeli occupation. In my presentation, I aim to shed light on the multifaceted repercussions of the siege on Gaza that began in 2007 and its impact on the higher education system, which has faced unprecedented challenges and transformations due to both direct and indirect targeting of the infrastructure, staff, and essentially all means of survival. Since the war on Gaza, the latest war on Gaza, commenced on the 7th of October, we have witnessed extensive destruction of all civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, universities, schools, everything, residential buildings, literally everything. This devastation is not merely physical. It's part of a deliberate strategy to target every facet of life in Gaza, particularly to target the younger generation. Universities globally symbolize hope and progress, but in Gaza, they now lie in ruins, starkly symbolizing the bleak prospects facing the youth in Gaza. and also signaling this message and sending this message to everyone in the West Bank as well, and maybe across the Arab region. This destruction affects not only the current landscape, but also casts long shadows on the future. If you look at the reality on the ground, it's horrifying. All academic institutions in Gaza have been targeted, some completely annihilated. Several university professors and academics, most notably physicist Sufyan Tayyeh and poet Rifat Al-Arair, were killed together with their families. This destruction of education institutions is part of the broader Israeli strategy to render Gaza uninhabitable. The attack on the Islamic University of Gaza on the 9th of October wasn't just an isolated incident. The loss of leading academics like Professor Tayyeh and Rifat Al-Arair are stark reminders of the assaults on Gaza intellectual community as a whole. These events symbolize an attack on the essence of Gaza's future, and that is the youth, the educated youth. And prior to this war, access to the basic necessities like drinking water was already limited. Like the energy sector was completely dependent on Israel and could be turned on and off at the flick of a finger. Hospitals have been turned into morgues at the moment, and universities into ruins. To start over, to rebuild the country, now it's almost impossible, because universities are generally where reconstruction and redevelopment begins, and we don't have these. We don't have anywhere to start from. We don't have ground zero to start the rebuilding and reconstruction from. And these challenges go beyond the direct impact of the current war. The siege and the repeated bombardments don't only damage the physical structure, but they also shatter the intellectual spirit of the Palestinian community, which is, I think, a fundamental part of the Israeli strategy, is to crush Palestinian resilience and to crush their spirit. For example, the Israeli permit system has isolated Gaza both academically and economically. Foreign nationals face near impossible odds of obtaining a permit to enter Gaza, which severely limits any potential for academic collaboration, which is essential to foster an academic and research environment. And also, this is ironically starkly different to what the Israeli institutions, the universities pride themselves with, which is international collaborations. They deny the Palestinians this chance, and these collaborations they're very crucial, especially now for economic development and technological innovation, considering the challenges that we face globally and also in Palestine, considering the context of the occupation. And important example of wasted potential is the efforts in Gaza to transition towards a green economy, towards renewable energy. Despite the siege and the energy dependency on Israel, there have been innovative efforts in the renewable energy solutions, particularly in solar power. However, these efforts face numerous obstacles. The energy sector is entirely dependent on Israel, which controls the fuel supply to its only power plant, and also uses the power as a political tool to pressure, as a tool for political pressure. But despite this, the Gazan engineers have tirelessly worked to develop green energy solutions, primarily led by struggling private and industrial sector. However, the import of essential materials and fabrication tools is heavily restricted. So institutions and businesses are forced to work with very limited resources, relying on open source technology and improvisation, with no access to industrial level innovation or the ability to collaborate with the international market or academic institutions. Also importing industrial raw materials and tools, including batteries, which are necessary to store solar energy, is also severely restricted. This forces reliance on less efficient alternatives like renewed car batteries, limiting solutions to domestic scale and constraining broader industrial deployment of these solutions. research lab where innovative solutions could be developed are virtually non-existent in Gaza. The closest thing that Gaza had to a research facility was one building at the Islamic University of Gaza that was completely destroyed on the very first day of the war of 2008. And since then, no lab equipment has been allowed into Gaza. So researchers focus mostly on theory and modeling, and they can't really develop innovative solutions to the challenges that the market is facing. So the lack of access to a mature market, to industrial level innovation, research lab, and international collaboration further stifles any potential for advancement. Furthermore, the collaboration between Palestinian universities in Gaza and universities in the West Bank is also hindered or made impossible due to the movement restrictions between Gaza and the West Bank, effectively limiting the reach of these universities and effectively sizing them down in terms of their potential market and also in terms of their human capital. So when the international community talks about economic revitalization of Gaza, they choose to ignore that this is objectively not possible without first freeing the Palestinians from the shackles of occupation. However, despite these these significant constraints, the spirit of innovation in Gaza persists. I will conclude with one notable example of the spirit of this, resilient spirit. It's a company called Tashkil, a 3D printing enterprise. It was a spin-out of the Islamic University of Gaza, the startup incubator at the Islamic University in Gaza. And they work with international medical NGOs to treat burns with 3D printed biomasks and develop other biomedical devices like joint supports and first aid tools. Tashkil, as you probably would know or expect, was bombed during the war of May 2021, and it's very likely, very possible that it was bombed again during the most recent bombardment campaign. So to conclude, one of the primary objectives of the occupation is to suppress any form of resilience that the Palestinians might exhibit. Universities stand as beacons not only for education, but also for social, political, and economic resilience. The very thing that the Israelis or the Israeli occupation tries to crush. Political and social change often originate from within university walls, just as economic and technological innovations do. These are all elements that the occupation seeks to suppress. The targeting of Palestinian academia, both directly through bombardment and the killing of intellectuals, and indirectly through siege and sanctions, is also a strategy to erode hope for a better future. It aims to instill a sense of helplessness and desperation amongst Palestinian youth. That's for me.
Thank you so much, Salim. And I'm going to hand over directly now to Samia.
Thank you, Arathi. I will be speaking actually with a particular focus on the West Bank. And also I will be tackling mostly the period after October 7th. In the West Bank, as Salim noted, Israel colonial policies, Israel has been devising these policies all along since the colonization of Palestine to target education in particular, because it is true, it does represent hope for us. And we utilize education also as a mechanism of resistance. And this is why Palestinians tend to be the highest educated population in the Middle East. It's not because we're cleverer or anything. It's because we see education as an important mechanism of resistance to understand the colonial reality, to contextualize it, to resist it. And particularly for women, Palestinian women tend to be actually the most educated compared to Palestinian men, but also compared to the rest of women in the region. So Israel has, devised mechanisms like movement restrictions all along to restrict Palestinians. It has used incursions into universities. It has actually bombed universities, destroyed the labs, restricted use of books. I mean, all of these mechanisms were utilized over the years to restrict education and to fight educational institutions. Following the 7th of October, I just want to show you some of the graphs of the West Bank and what has been happening. Since the 7th of October, we have had more than 300 people killed in the West Bank, over 3,500 injured, and over 4,000 arrested. This is for the entire population and not just the student or university population in the West Bank. And in a way, for the entire year as a whole, there were more than 500 people killed in the West Bank over the course of this year, and more than 13,000 injuries. This is particularly high by the annual average for the West Bank. This is a map of the West Bank showing the introduction of Israeli restrictions since the 7th of October. The orange circles, large dots that you can see, these are areas where Palestinians have experienced displacement by settlers, actually. So settlers have been pushing people out of their villages, of their communities, and displacing several communities, particularly, as you can see, in the east of the West Bank and the south in particular, in Hebron. These areas are areas that were always targeted by Israeli settlers, attacking small communities, especially Bedouin communities. Since the 7th of October, there has been intense targeting of these areas. The little crosses here and there, these are the checkpoints. Now we have over 690 active checkpoints in the West Bank. These restrict the movement between Palestinian governorates, as we call them, but also within regions, within localities. They restrict movement between main cities and villages and refugee camps. And these restrictions have grave repercussions for the educational system, as I will be explaining in a minute. This is also just to show you what has been happening in the West Bank with regards to house demolitions and the destruction of structures. These structures could be in a way homes, they could be businesses, they could be farms. So Israel is actively targeting both lives and livelihoods. As you can see, last month in November, there were 149 people who were displaced and more than 65 structures that were demolished. This data stops at the middle of December, actually. So the later part of last week and the later part of this month to come, the data has not been structured as yet. But the point is that although Israel's genocide on the Gaza Strip has been, ongoing, catastrophic, with catastrophic results, and the loss of life and the loss of livelihoods has been huge. In the West Bank, Israel has been actively targeting the population through not only reintroduction of movement restrictions, but also through destroying homes, displacing people, and ethnically cleansing the population. In terms of education, what has been happening? It's basically a continuation and intensification of Israel's policies. Israel has always been targeting students. So more than 35 students were killed during since October 7th, and 271 were injured. More than 82 students were arrested. Also, staff, be it academics, teachers, administrators, have also been detained. Universities over the past 2 months have also been raided. Birzeit University, and Sundus will tell us more about that. Khadouri University in the north, Tubas branch of the Open University as well in the north of the West Bank has been raided. What Israel does in these raids is basically destruction. It enters the university, destroys premises, destroys labs, basically confiscates student union material, leaflets, whatever. It's basically a violation of campuses as secure spaces of education and learning. And in a way, students have in the West Bank, and I'm talking here about higher education students, have been active in protesting what's going on in Gaza through demonstrations and through actually actively engaging their colleagues from the rest of the world. So students at Birzeit and other students in other Palestinian universities have been active in explaining what's happening, contextualizing it, and basically trying to politically address what's happening in the Gaza Strip as much as possible. Since the 7th of October, we've been teaching online, all nearly with the exception of few local colleges. Most colleges and universities have been teaching online because of movement restrictions. Our students and staff cannot move easily. Students, especially university students, are targeted at checkpoints. So they get arrested. They basically have to be extra careful, and therefore no Palestinian university has been running normally. I'll just want to use the last minute to address the issue of dealing with the dealing with the Palestinian reality as a humanitarian case versus it being a political case. Our predicament, as you all know, is political. It is humanitarian issues are an outcome, are a repercussion, but the essence of our predicament is political. And therefore, for us, it's important to address your solidarity with us politically. And that includes, at the moment, protesting and voicing your concern about what Israel does. But it's also important to take this further through boycotts. And the academic and cultural boycott in particular is an area where it actually has an effective impact on Israel, and also it is a significant tool of solidarity with our struggle. So it is important, again, for me to stress the issue of political solidarity and not just to feel sympathy and to feel sorry for the Palestinians. It is important to act by actually standing effectively in solidarity with our struggle. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Samia. Between your piece and Salim, we really see how there have been these intensifying attacks on education, both in Gaza and in the West Bank, and for the reminder of the political imperative for us all to act. I'd like to hand over now to Adi.
Yes, thank you, Arafi, and I hope that I'll be exactly on time like Samia and Salim. So what's happening in the Palestinian education in 48 of Palestinian citizens of Israel, is very interesting in the way the academia itself has broadened its authority over the students, in a way that we are dealing with more than 160 cases of disciplinary procedures against students in the universities themselves. Now, this is happening while the academic year didn't even start yet, and while the students have posted all of them. We are talking about posts and expressions on social media that are not connected to the universities or to the colleges. But at the same time, these institutions are taking, as they see, part in the war, part in the censorship, and part in the prevention of free speech. And what do I mean part? Since the 7th of October, as my colleagues have also expanded, the policy of the Israeli Authority is a crackdown on Palestinians everywhere, meaning that Palestinians are being prevented from their most basic rights. They are being attacked in numerous ways and in different means. And what we've seen in Adala, and we've monitored this since the war started, there is a complete ban on protests. No one is allowed to protest against the war. We have filed a couple of petitions to the Supreme Court on this matter, and the police continuously prevented any kind of protest against the war. There has been a crackdown on free speech by the authorities themselves. We're talking about around 300 arrests for posts on social media and for being part of protests and taking part in protests, and almost around 70 to 80 indictments on the charges of supporting terrorism and sympathy with terrorist organization, which of course are declared within the counterterrorism law, a law that is used and a lot of times to crack down on Palestinians and to prevent free speech. Now, alongside that, there has been also a campaign against workers in workplaces. Any worker who posted anything that has to do with the 7th of October has faced procedures that sometimes ended his work or her work. And in a lot of cases, these workers and the students eventually ended up in investigations which affected either their studies or their work. Now, maybe to focus a little bit on what's happening at the universities, what we are seeing are arbitrary, indiscriminate procedures that aim towards silencing Palestinians altogether. Silencing meaning that any practice of Palestinian identity, any practice of free speech that derives from even the simplest sympathy with the Gazan population is seen as a threat and is seen as supporting the enemy. And we've seen that in a lot of cases where students who only posted on social media videos from the attacks, the indiscriminate attacks on the civilian population in Gaza. They faced disciplinary procedures, and some of them were even expelled from the institutions because they were anti-Israeli and supporting the enemy. Other cases, we had disciplinary procedures of students who posted quotes from the Quran, posted surahs from the Quran, and they were blamed for posting these quotes from the Quran in the same period of the war, meaning that they supported Hamas and they supported the enemy, and therefore they cannot continue the studies in the universities. Other examples are people who posted their opinions and were very critical on the colonial background and the colonial context of the conflict and of the Palestinian cause. And they were also facing disciplinary charges and were silenced, and a lot of them were kicked out from and were expelled from their studies. Now, it's important to notice that this is not new, meaning that despite the fact that we are dealing with a much wider phenomenon of persecution and silencing of Palestinian voices, this procedure has its roots either from the Israeli police and the Israeli institutions who have also been, each time we have an emergency situation, there's a crackdown on freedom of expression. But also in universities and colleges, student activism has also been suppressed and prevented in the last couple of years and ever since 48. In a lot of cases, we see that the attempt of students to have any kind of Palestinian activity, they are being prevented, a lot of times are being interrogated. One of the examples is the Nakba ceremony, which is done each and every year by Palestinian students in the Israeli institutions. Last year, there were a lot of attempts to prevent the ceremony, and a lot of students were threatened by the intelligence and by the police to not continue with these activities. Other examples are silencing students who express anything that has to do with Palestinian heritage and Palestinian poetry and literature. In the case of Watan Madi in Ben Gurion University, where she cited some of Mahmoud Darwish poetry and eventually was put in front of a disciplinary procedure. Therefore, when we look at the general atmosphere of the academia in Israel, of the academic institutions, we see that despite the attempts of the academic institutions themselves to pose themselves as supporting free speech, they are eventually supporting free speech of some people and preventing the free speech of Palestinians. Any attempt to practice your Palestinian identity, any attempt to criticize the war is being prevented. And what is interesting, and I will finish with this, is that the main aspect of the last things that we are seeing from the academia is the fact that the universities and colleges have acquired an authority that they do not have by law. They decided that they have this kind of moral obligation to prevent anyone who does not support the Israeli war and the Israeli cause and its genocide in Gaza. We see that there is an attempt to revenge Palestinian students, either for not explicitly expressing their support to the Israeli side, or by the mere fact that they decided to support Palestinians and to support or to say any kind of sympathy for the civilian population in Gaza. Right now, from all the cases we are dealing with, I can say that the majority of the cases, and we are representing in more than 90 cases in disciplinary procedures, the vast majority of them are arbitrary cases. They showcase the Islamophobia and the racism in the academia towards Palestinians. It reflects a general atmosphere of hatred, a general atmosphere of resilience, a general atmosphere of an enemy doctrine that sees Palestinians as enemies no matter what, and they have to prove otherwise. Eventually, a lot of the students have not only faced disciplinary procedure, but were also interrogated in the police, and a lot of them have faced also criminal charges. In some cases, the universities and the colleges themselves approached the police and approached the authorities in a way to also prevent them and to revenge, in an act of revenge against the students for posting. I would also send in the chat in a minute after I'm done my presentation, the report that we have of 2023 from Adala. And of course, we would be glad for any kind of support and donation in that matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adi. And I think, our next speaker, Sundos, will, I'm sure, pick up some of the themes that you mentioned here too. And I just wanted to remind those who are attending today, please feel free to post in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen any questions that you might have for our panelists. So Sunus, can I welcome you to take the floor?
Thank you, Arathi, and thank you for the Galilee Foundation and for FOBZO for coordinating this event. So, as my colleagues expressed, Palestinians have long regarded education as a means of resilience and survival under military occupation and in exile. But just as Palestinians recognize education as the cornerstone for development and nation building, Israel has apparently followed much the same logic in reverse, with the schools and universities suffering military attacks and obstruction of access. So the Right to Education campaign was launched in 2002 in the second uprising in Palestine as a product of a long history of activism at Birzeit University in response of the ongoing repression of Palestinian educational institutions. The Right to Education campaign is a Palestinian grassroots campaign that is led by students. And as we document violations towards the right to education in Palestine, we also try to mobilize our causes as students and scholars internationally. We operate within a clear vision, which is the right to education as a fundamental human right that is essential to be aware of other human rights as Palestinians, and it is a tool of resilience and resisting the Israeli oppression under the settler colonialism context. Today, I'm gonna present some of the violations or the main violations being opposed on us as Palestinian students and academics in Palestine, starting from the most obvious, which some of you has mentioned, or some of the panelists has mentioned, which is the restriction of movement. Looking at the map of Palestine, you can see that the cantonization of the West Bank and Gaza Strip due to the siege on Gaza for more than 16 years, and the frequent closure of cities, hundreds of military roadblocks and checkpoints, and the construction of the illegal apartheid wall and settlements in the West Bank have resulted in the localization of higher education. This has caused universities in the West Bank and in Palestine in general, such as Birzeit University, losing some of their main characters or main national characters as students are facing increasing difficulties in accessing the university. For example, in 2000, at the start of the second uprising, in Birzeit University alone, we had more than 350 Gazan students enrolled in Birzeit University. Today, we nearly have 10 students out of 15,000 students enrolled in Birzeit University. This reality is reflecting the high impact of Israel's policies of collective punishment on students and have a huge effect on localizing higher education in Palestine. Speaking about collective punishment, our Palestinian student movement also is being opposed by collective punishment from the Israeli occupation because it criminalizes it. And the Israeli occupation considers these student movement as illegal by military Israeli orders. So this has been just something to justify the injustice, arrest, and harassment that these students are subjected to on their daily basis or daily life. Just to give some facts and figures about this, since 1982 until today, over than 2,000 students from Birzeit University alone has been imprisoned in the Israeli prisons. Since the 7th of October, the Right to Education campaign has documented over 40 students have been arrested by the Israeli occupation, including 3 female students, raising the total number of Birzeit University students in the Israeli prisons to over 120 students. The female students were released during the truce agreement, but still we have over 100 students in the Israeli prison. And most of them now under administrative detention, which gives the Israeli occupation the right to arrest students under a secret file for indefinite time, and they can deny them from seeing a lawyer up to 90 days. That's not all. We have 33 martyrs among students today from Birzeit University. Three of them were just brutally killed from the Israeli occupation last November in 2022. Among them, the two brothers, Jawad and Dhafir Rimawi, who were killed in the same day, unfortunately. Moreover, Birzeit University has been raided 20 times since 2002. As Dr. Samia mentioned, the last two raids, the last 2 months, we have been raided twice. The first raid was in the 24th of September, where they raided campus, invaded the campus, and arrested 8 students. Among them is the elected student president of the student council. The violation continues on the international level by the attempt of the Israeli colonialism to hinder the development of the Palestinian universities by isolating the universities from its international academic society. In February 2022, and in a striking violation against Palestinian academic freedom, the Israeli military issued a new directive titled Procedure for Entry and Residence of Foreigners in the Judea and Samaria area, referring to the West Bank. The new directive, which took effect in October 2022, directly puts Palestinian...
We can wait to see if she's able to reconnect. Hi, Sundas, are you there?
Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry
okay. Well, let's continue. It would be fantastic to hear the rest of your presentation, and then I can invite the rest of the panelists for discussion.
Thank you. So I was just mentioning about the new directive regarding the entry of procedures of entry to the West Bank, which hinders the autonomy of the universities and the academic freedom of the universities. And it's not the Israeli occupation first attempt to isolate Palestinian universities. As in 1980, the Israeli occupation issued military order 854, which places institutions of higher education under the command of the Israeli governor, conferring the position control over enrollment and staff appointments. The order required all foreign staff and faculty at Birzeit University to sign an anti-PLO statement at the time as a condition to obtain work permits. The continuous implementation of such procedures is based on a racist and multi-layered system of settler colonial control that denies Palestinians or Palestinian people of their most fundamental rights, especially their right to development and self-determination. Last but not least, one of the main the most dangerous violation that we consider is very dangerous because not that obvious to us is how the Israeli occupation is trying to control the narrative of Palestinians and to control their permission to narrate in their textbooks and the curricula in the schools, and also how they are trying to oppose censorship and high media surveillance through social media and other and authors and everything for
Okay, unfortunately, it looks like Sundas's connection is not stable.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay,
you're back now.
Yeah, to wrap up quickly, I was just saying that the most dangerous violation has to do with how the Palestinians are thinking about themselves, about their identity in the textbooks and the curriculums in the schools and universities, and how the Israeli occupation is trying to also occupy these spaces, not only by shrinking the spaces of freedom of speech in the universities, but also shrinking the spaces in the social media, in the books, in the that is being censored, also in the high surveillance of everyday life for Palestinians. So this cannot be taken away from the occupying of the land. What is being done today is a systematic Israeli policies to hinder the Palestinians' development as a nation, everywhere they are, not only in Palestine, but also in exile and in refugee camps, and the Palestinians who are living in the 48 occupied land, in Jerusalem, and everywhere. And today, unfortunately, while the Israeli occupation is committing a genocide in Gaza for more than 75 days and depriving more than 2 million Palestinians from their life, from their right to live and exist, it still spares the time to escalate violations towards Palestinians' right to education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sundas. And if I could ask the panel to all come back now, and we can have about 10 minutes together for some questions. Our participants have asked some interesting questions in the Q&A function. So I think I'll start with a question that might be directed to Adi, but feel free to others if you would like to contribute. The question is, are there any Israeli academics speaking up for Palestinian students? And if they do openly support Palestinians, is anything happening to them?
Yes, thank you. So there are, it's important to say there is a minority of Israeli academics, at least within 48 borders, who are supporting, let's say, at least, I wouldn't even say supporting Palestinians, or say at least supporting some kind of ceasefire. This is the bare minimum at this stage that is being expected. And what we are seeing or witnessing, if I want to talk about the general atmosphere, is that the academia is taking part as a sub-state actor within the state in the efforts of the war itself. And this is the general atmosphere. That is not to say that there are no Israeli academics who are actually supporting either the Palestinian students or are trying to raise their voices against the crackdown on Palestinians. And now a lot of them have faced a backlash, either for their appointment in the university. A lot of them have faced threats from the president of the university or the college and so on. We had a case of a professor who faced even disciplinary procedure for expressing opinions. And there are other cases of also Palestinian academics who have faced a lot of processes within the Israeli academic institutions. One of the cases in the Hebrew University of Nadra for Korean, that she faced a procedure in the university for expressing her concern and for signing a petition to stop the killing of Palestinian children. Therefore, we're talking about a situation where not only a voice criticizing the war is not allowed, any voice that is outside the mainstream of not supporting the war is not allowed. It's a dystopian reality where the state, the academia, and a vast majority of the public is seen as taking part in the efforts of the war in any way possible. And anything that is outside of the scope is seen as a threat, not only as an expression that is outside the mainstream, but actually a threat to the continuous efforts of the war.
Thank you, Adi. Does anyone else want to contribute on this point? Otherwise, I have another question that I think perhaps all panelists might be able to feed into. We've received lots of messages of solidarity from participants who appear to be coming from around the world. And there are a number of questions here about as well as campaigns around petitions, political pressure, divestment, and so on, are there any short or long-term practical support that we can offer? For example, online classes or other actions. So there's a series of questions here about from participants about what else they can do to support practical actions.
I would say, despite how challenging this might be, but try to go to Palestine and work with Palestinian universities and Palestinian academics. If you have the capacity to collaborate even remotely with Palestinian researchers, that would be of the utmost value, I think, and also challenging. Well, there are severe restrictions on Gaza, and there are restrictions on the West Bank, as Suna's just explained. But putting pressure on that and raising awareness that we can't go. I say to my colleagues that you can't go and work, and you can't go and visit me in Gaza. And a lot of people don't know this and don't realize this. People think that people can't go to Gaza because it's not a nice place to be in, and not because Israel actually stops people from going in. So just working with Palestinian universities, I think is very, very important, and pushing Israeli authorities to allow more Palestinians and more internationals and in Gaza and the West Bank would be very useful.
I think also it's important to support Palestinian universities' access to the rest of the world. Over the past 4 years, many European countries, the EU as an entity has been requiring Palestinian universities to sign an anti-terrorist note in order to access funding, in order to access partnerships. After October 7th, we've been noticing that universities across Europe, be it in the EU or otherwise, NGOs, any scheme of cooperation, be it large or small, we are suddenly required to sign this anti-terrorist note. And this anti-terrorist note says basically that we, the Palestinians, have to recognize that we are terrorists and that we condemn our terrorism. And then, since we are terrorists and we condemn our terrorism, now we are fit enough to access funding with the rest of the world. And of course, we've been refusing, many of us. Birzeit University, for example, has refused to sign this anti-terrorist note because what it actually does, it requires us to define ourselves, i.e., accept European definitions of ourselves as being, terrorists. That's it, and therefore, we have not been able to actually apply for joint projects. We have not been able to access funding. So this actually requires joint work. We've been working here on the ground, protesting and, basically articulating why we're not accepting this and fighting back from your end as European academics and European universities and solidarity groups is also important because this anti-terrorist note has been imposed upon us by Israeli efforts. So Israel is trying to marginalize Palestinian academia and is trying to even pressure us further. And so therefore, this is an area which is highly, highly contentious for us. Not just, I agree with Salim, having students and academics from the rest of the world coming into Palestine, but also having us as Palestinians working with colleagues is also very important. And I want to again re-emphasize BDS because BDS is a mechanism for us that exposes what Israel is all about. it exposes Israel's true face as a settler colonial state that actually oppresses the Palestinians because it aims to drive the Palestinians out and ethnic cleanses us. So it exposes Israel's face, but also it brings us all to work together against these colonial policies. So it's a form of resistance that is inclusive. It's not just inclusive of our struggle, but it's also inclusive of other struggles, anti-racist struggles around the world. So that's why the movement for us as Palestinians is extremely important, be it in the academic, be it in the cultural scene, the economic, and mostly at the moment also the arms companies, investments, university investments in companies that deal with arms and so on. So you have actually a whole spectrum of mechanisms of standing in solidarity with our struggle, be it in the short term or in the long term.
Thank you, Samia. Sundar, so Adi, Salim, if you'd like to come in on this, only suggesting because there's been about 4 or 5, 6 messages in the Q&A about ways of expressing and acting in solidarity.
I think I would just maybe add in a sentence because Samia said everything very beautifully. One of the major things that we are trying to talk about these days is to expose the Israeli academia. It's important to expose the reality of that Palestinian students are living in these institutions and the reality of these institutions themselves. It's important to raise awareness to their role in suppressing and silencing speech, especially the speech of Palestinians. And I think it's important to also raise awareness and try and form any pressure to protect the voices of Palestinians in the academia.
Yes, for me, I think that it's really important to also affiliate with students, Palestinian student movement in the Palestinian universities, try to break the siege that the Israeli occupation is trying to put these universities with. As my colleagues mentioned, it's not only on the research level, but also on the activities and activism level. You can affiliate with such campaigns like the Right to Education campaign, and you can also do activities and teaching some classes or about Palestine, about the history of Palestine, about the context of settler colonialism. I think it's really important at this time to not only raise awareness, but for this awareness to have an action. I read one of the questions that was talking about peace and relations with Israeli students or maybe Israeli researchers or scholars. At the time of genocide, no one from the Israeli scholars or students have taken a stand against this genocide, as Adi and others mentioned. And the Israeli universities today are complicit with this genocidal war on many levels, even the military level. So for us, it's really important to adopt the BDS, especially the boycott, the academic and the cultural boycott, it's a position that we will take until these scholars take the responsibility of their their I don't know, their knowledge, which bringing this life or this society into a better life, not to racing and have an ethnic cleansing of people in order for them to exist or for their nation to exist. When that happens, then we will have peace with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, we have run over time now, so it is time to close, but I wanted to extend my warm thanks to the organizers of this panel and our fantastic panelists, Adi, Samia, Sundus, and Salim. We've come here today to learn about the war on Palestinian education. We've heard about the systemic attacks on education and learnt that this is happening precisely because education is a beacon of freedom. So thank you, panelists, for also ending on notes of solidarity, how we can act in solidarity, the ways that we can take these lessons forward in our classrooms and into our institutions and our research. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a fantastic evening, and it's time to say goodbye now.
Goodbye.